The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I just said, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought we were boxing.
All right, so we have the one and only women's winner of the recently completed EDP Vizsla Pro Portugal and the current Challenger Series rankings leader, Macy Callaghan, on the lineup. Macy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So where are you in the world right now? What are you getting up to?
I'm currently home. I live on the Gold Coast now, so I'm in Palm Beach, just relaxing and having some time off. It's very nice.
Well earned, and you know, as it so often happens at the ASPWSL, following your big win in Portugal, there was a lot of conjecture over just how quote unquote locked you were for next year's championship tour, and where we finally landed on officially was that you are quote unquote 99.995% confirmed. So congratulations are in order. That's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know you hear so many different things, but I am very happy. Obviously, I'm not going to Brazil, so I was taking that 99.5%.
What could go wrong? Yeah. Well, so I was going to ask you about that because I think you're probably safe. But I was going to ask you about that because we've got two more events left on the Challenger Series. We have the Challenger Series event in Saquarema and then the final event in Haleiwa. Because of your performance, I mean, really over the course of the whole season, but specifically, you know, those last three events, you got a runner-up in Bolito, a runner-up at the US Open, and then a win in Portugal. Did that performance run kind of inform whether or not you were going to do Saquarema? And follow-up question, are you still going to plan on going to Haleiwa?
Yeah, I honestly, I had a plan at the start of the year, and it was kind of this year I was just focusing on myself and what I actually wanted to do and what events I wanted to choose. And my goal was actually to not have to go to Brazil. I knew that from previous years, I was just getting so burnt out by the end of the year. And I really, coming into those last events, the pressure was just way too much for me. I just wanted to obviously be in front. And if I was to qualify, I wanted to be in front coming into the last two events of the year. So I chose at the start of the year, I was not going to Brazil. That was the plan. And everything turned out well for me. Sure. So it's nice having to take this event off and knowing that I'm in a good spot, and I will be going to Haleiwa. So it's nice knowing going into that event that I could potentially be qualified. And I can just kind of have fun with it.
You know, as you mentioned, it's really, really easy. I think probably more easy in the past to get really burnt out, but we're kind of on the other side a little bit of that pandemic non-season. There's been a huge amount of change to the tours and competition framework. And it's funny, we were having this conversation today with a few folks that came in the building, and it was one of those things where we said, look, I don't think all the surfers, certainly not all the staff or the surfing community at large, have kind of wrapped their arms around the new rhythms of the tour. But I think people are finding it like, oh, yeah, okay, if I'm not competing on the championship tour this season, you know, there's 7 Challenger Series events. Those run from May through December. I can kind of plan my year out. And then as that stabilizes over the next few years, as an athlete, it's probably very advantageous because you're able to say, okay, I know that I have a few months, depending on my results, where I don't have any events. I can use that to recover, and I can maybe get other kind of work done. Has that gone into your planning for 2022 at all?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, my career on the tour started at quite a young age. I was like 17 when I first went on to tour.
I'm glad you brought that up because I looked at, I'm like, I feel like Macy's like 28 because she's
I'm
so
like a
mature.
veteran
And then
at
I'm like, oh
22.
my God, yeah, you're 22. You've achieved so
Yeah.
much already. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first was on tour, I was doing both all the CT events and the QS events at that time. And that was around 16 or 17 events a year. And it was so crazy. Like I was never home. I was just on the road constantly. And that's probably where I got burnt out.
Sure.
But
Of
with
course,
this new format and the scheduling, you can really plan out the year. And, you know, the media cut for the CT, it's obviously a lot easier now when you just, you know what's ahead kind of thing.
Right.
And yeah, I was able to plan out this year really well. I knew what events I wanted to do and where I was going. And then I was able to, obviously I do a lot of stuff for Billabong and my sponsors. So I was able to
Of course.
plan some trips with them. And that was also another, like a focus for me for this year, was to plan some free surfing trips and also keep that fun alive whilst traveling and competing. So yeah, this year's been nice.
One of the things that I've heard from a lot of the surfers that have competed this year is that under the previous structure, where it was a pretty open qualifying series, you had all these QS events at different levels. And as you pointed out, like there were dozens of events a year and they ran pretty much January through December. There was a lot more randomness in terms of, the conditions you might surf in, the competitors you might face. And what I've heard from some of the Challenger Series competitors this year is that it's a fairly similar field, right? Because you have to qualify through your regional qualifying series to get to this Challenger Series level. So you kind of know who you're competing against. The level's a little bit higher. The wave venues are a little bit better. And that's taken a little bit of the randomness out of it compared to what it used to be. And have you found that throughout your season this year, or is it much the same?
Yeah. For me, I feel like, as I said, I feel like a veteran now. I feel like I've been doing this long enough to know who's at the comps, where I've been able to surf a majority of the event sites, like a lot. So coming into, this year, I was super comfortable going to each place.
Right.
I'd already been there. I knew what was ahead of me and who I was versing, kind of thing. But previous years, it was obviously very random. You didn't really know what was happening. You were kind of just going with the flow, and especially the early years when I was on tour and not qualifying, what event should I do? Right. What shouldn't I do? It was a little bit random, but the new format's a lot easier to navigate, I feel like.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you're originally from Avoca, I believe, but now you're living on the Gold Coast. So the way that this Challenger Series season kind of set up was pretty advantageous, at least starting for you, right? Because you started in your adopted home on the Gold Coast, and then the next event was in Manly, so it's not Avoca, but it's Sydney, and a lot of surfers kind of go into two different spaces when it comes to competing at home. Some of them love the familiarity and getting to sleep in their own beds and having their support teams there, and then others we've seen at really every level kind of feel like they have a ton of pressure to perform and to do their hometown proud. Where did you fall in those opening two events, just in terms of did you feel like it was advantageous for you, or did you feel like sort of an abnormal amount of pressure to perform in front of your friends and family?
Yeah. It's funny. The first, Snapper Rocks for me, I've obviously moved to the Gold Coast 6 years ago, and I surf Snapper pretty much every day. But I honestly couldn't handle the pressure out there. It was so much. I feel like when you take away the 100 people that are usually out there and you only have another girl out there and your friends and family on the beach, I was so nervous. I couldn't contain myself. I was so excited to get a wave to myself, and I was just so excited to perform in front of everyone that I kind of forgot what I was doing. But for me, that wave is so high performance. It's I expected myself to do a lot better. I was probably putting too much pressure on myself.
Right.
But that's probably the one event that really got to me. I think I went back to Avoca Beach this year for the regional tour for the QS, the regional 3000. And I ended up winning that, and I felt so comfortable there. I was it's my hometown. I felt so comfortable. Right. It was a little bit different. But I don't know. It just depends. I think Snapper's the one place for me that just gets me nervous.
It's funny you bring that up too, because I remember, but fortunate enough to do this for almost 20 years now, and it's so rare that even when the CT started at Snapper Rocks, that we had sort of clean, consistent waves at Snapper Rocks. Like I probably can count the amount of years we had that on like one hand, and so it was really jarring to me just to look at the lineup of like clean little waves at Snapper Rocks with only like a few people out. Like it's so, because we're just so used to seeing it and surfing with so many people out there. And you mentioned the pressure thing. In the instances where I've surfed some of these spots with very few people out, or sometimes no people out, I'm always struck by how often I use other people in the lineup as sort of like gauges in terms of like, oh, that person's paddling over there, there must be a set, or like the pack's moving over there, I'm going to move over here. And anytime I find myself without like the masses that you usually surf with, I'm like, oh man, I don't actually have that point of information anymore. This is a little bit off-putting.
Yeah, I know it's hard. Snapper, I like the crowd is so gnarly. It's always so heavy to get a wave. I'm lucky now. I've managed to find my place with the boys up the top. My boyfriend is a local here, so that makes it a lot easier. But yeah, take him out and everyone else out, you kind of do get lost. And it's like that weird feeling. You're like, I surf here every day, but I feel like I still don't know where I am.
Right.
Yeah. And just that added pressure of everyone watching you on the beach, knowing that everyone expects you probably to do crazy stuff and everyone's just watching unridden waves go by. You're just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it drives you nuts. So back-to-back nights to start the Challenger Series season on the Gold Coast and at Manly, which are good results. But then you kind of go from the familiarity of competing at home to flying all the way halfway around the world to Bolito. You get a runner-up in Bolito. You fly halfway around the world again to the U.S. Open. You get runner-up at the U.S. Open. Huge results. And I mean, you mentioned it before where you felt like you're maybe putting a little bit too much pressure on yourself at home. In terms of the Bolito and U.S. Open events, because you were so far away from home, did that help you somewhat psychologically? Or are you like, you know what, I'm focused on competing and what I have to do on these waves and all that kind of hometown pressure? It's nowhere near me.
Yeah, for sure. At the start of the year, I had the goal just to start off doing the Australian leg and see how I felt, see what was going through my head, seeing whether I wanted to continue doing the Challenger Series and travel overseas.
Right.
I started off with, 2 nights, which isn't horrible, but for me, it wasn't where I wanted to be. Obviously, for me, I want to be in the final.
Of course. But real quick, were there results? Because I think that's really interesting what you said. Were there results that you'd already mapped out? Like if you'd done, let's just make it up, 13th or 25th in both those events, did you already know that, oh, if I don't do better than that, I'm not traveling on the Challenger Series this year?
Yeah, the 9th, I was satisfied enough with that to be where on the rankings where I was. Yeah, if I had anything worse than that, I probably would have just been like, you know what, I think I need some time off.
Right, yeah.
But the previous year I had got 9ths the whole year. The first year on the Challenger Series, that was like consistent 9ths, and I was like, okay, it's driving me insane.
Right.
I want to do better. And I like my competitive instinct like came out. I was like, okay, I need to do better. So going into Bolito, I was super relaxed. I've been to South Africa a few times. It was actually my first time to Bolito itself, but I love South Africa. I was going there just wanting to do well, and I think, I just really wanted to get better than a 9th. So I was very happy about that one.
Right. It's something that comes up on this podcast quite a lot because we have the good fortune of speaking with really, really high level surfers, whether they're championship tour surfers or surfers that decided to take a different path. It's not unlike a lot of other sports where you have a huge pool of surfers that maybe start surfing but never ever even compete in amateurs, and then you have a pretty big pool that compete in amateurs, and even smaller group ever go into the pro juniors, and then a smaller group, and so on and so forth. And by the time you get to even the Challenger Series, it's such a small pool compared to that really big pool of people who try it. And even that small pool of Challenger Series surfers, it's so rare to win an event. And you took down the EDP Vizsla Pro in Portugal this year after having back-to-back finals in Bolito and the US Open. Can you kind of run us through just the psychology of winning an event and if it feels any different to the other events? Does something have to click for you to be like, no, this is now my event, I'm winning it, as opposed to like, I'm a good surfer, but I just didn't get the result?
Yeah, for sure. I think previous years I was doing a lot of work, like physical work. I was working out a lot more. I was really hungry to get a win. I was training a bunch and probably overdoing it, to be honest.
Right,
I was just like so hyper focused on it. It consumed most of my life. Whereas this year I've taken a massive step back. I've honestly hardly worked out. I've just like probably worked on my mental game a lot more. And I think that's where the space I needed to work on. I was just getting so consumed by competing and meeting everyone's expectations. And I had all this pressure on myself and what other people wanted to see me doing. And it really drove me insane. I was super unhappy competing where I was at. I didn't want to travel. I was just like so over it. And this year I took a massive step back. I've probably done like half the amount of surfing that I usually do. I've just been like doing what I wanted to do and just figuring out what space works best for me. And I think that's what really worked well coming into these events. I was just super happy with my life and where I was at. And yeah, I was just feeling comfortable. I was traveling with a good bunch of people and staying with some friends. And I just felt like, everything was just like nice and calm for the first time.
It's so interesting you bring that up because it's something we talk about quite a bit in at headquarters here, and with Jesse Miley Dyer leading the tours and competition team. And it's surfing so unique in that it has such a dynamic field of play with the ocean. It's so unpredictable, right? And any other sport, whether it's basketball or soccer or football or rugby, whatever it is, it's a static field of play. The field or the court, it's the same every time you go out and compete. So, you could be the fastest, strongest, most talented. You could work the hardest. You could do all this work and step onto the court or step onto the field with a pretty high level of swagger and confidence that you are the best. Mm-hmm. You could do all the exact same things in surfing, and you step out into the ocean and you're like, I might lose. I'm not in control, mm-hmm. and that's the ocean. And it's interesting. It's interesting you said you had to kind of take a step back, because it sounds like you were doing a lot of those things, like the preparation things and the training things. And it's almost like if you don't create that space and flexibility and adaptability, and as you pointed out, like calmness, you could really get frustrated competing because you're like, why is it not happening for me? And we've seen it time and again at the CT level. It's people have to kind of step back and let go for it to make sense.
Yeah. Our sport involves Mother Nature. We can't, it's just, the ocean, you never know what she's going to bring. And especially when you're trying super hard and you're losing constantly. And it's just like, you're doing everything right, but you're still losing. It's like, it's confusing. You're like, what am I, like, what's happening?
Right.
And yeah, for me, that was just like getting me down. It ended up to the point where I was like not enjoying surfing, and I had to really go back and focus on like why I love it so much and why I even do it. I've been like a water baby since birth. So my whole life revolves around the ocean. And I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to do this. And that was really sad. And yeah, I had to take a massive step back and just get back to the start and start loving everything again.
Absolutely. And it's again, going back to the uniqueness of competitive surfing, like throughout the 5 decades of professional surfing, or at least an international tour, like there's always been people that are very dedicated to the craft and training and the professionalism of it. And then they run into, equally talented people, but maybe people that are a little looser and party and don't take it as seriously, and they get out in the heat. And sometimes those people win, and you're going like, what the hell? Like, I was like, how is that possible? But I do think I think there's something in that approach, not recommending everyone replicate it. There's something in that approach where that kind of detachment and calmness is built in to the letting go part of it, where you're like, yeah, I don't take it as seriously. It helps.
Yeah, totally. It's funny. Before Portugal, I actually went on like a girls' trip to Mexico and New York with all my like best friends, and
awesome.
We definitely were just having a holiday, having fun. It was honestly like the best trip of my life. We were just having the most fun. And then going into Portugal, I hadn't surfed for like a week or so, and I was like kind of stressing, but I was also just like high on life. I was just like, I just had like the best girls trip, and I was just feeling so relaxed. And I think that's why I won. Honestly, I was just like, just having the best time, and I was just traveling and seeing places, like first time to New York, and it was just like so fun. And then going to Portugal, I was just like super excited.
Well, it worked out. So congratulations. We'll do proper congratulations when that last 0.005% locks in or whatever it is.
Yes.
We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right. So before the break, you mentioned that you were a water baby since birth, and you're born Avoca Beach in New South Wales. Tell us what that was like. Like, what is Avoca Beach like for people who have never had the privilege of going there? What was your family like? Mom, dad, brothers, sisters?
Yeah. Both my parents are born and raised on the Central Coast. Around the entrance, my dad was a North Shelley board riders like founder. He was a surfer. My two older sisters were both very involved in surf life saving and swimming. That's kind of where I started off doing surf life saving. I was very competitive in that area and loved pool swimming as well. That was like my whole life growing up. And then my dad was sick of taking us all to nippers every Saturday and was like, no, someone has to surf in this family. So it was me. So yeah, he got me into it, and it started off as something that was a real challenge to me. It didn't come naturally. I was just like constantly wanting to get better. And I just stuck with it, and I loved it.
It's always interesting too. Like, I'm a father of 8-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, and I talk to a lot of other dads and moms in the surfing space, and I can't speak for everyone, but it feels like you end up in that space where you go, okay, it'd be great if they surfed with me. That kind of might double or triple my surfing time at some point, probably like your dad was thinking. Yeah. But then you also have probably been exposed to so many situations where it's like, I don't want to scar the kid or push them into doing something they don't want to do. So it's a little bit like, it's a little push and pull on the learning stuff. I'm wondering if he learned anything from your two older sisters that he's like, okay, I'm not going to do that with Macy. I'm going to get one that actually takes the surfing.
Yeah, I think he was actually hoping when I was born I was a boy, but he got another girl. So, but he was still dedicated to have a surfer in the family for sure. But no, it's nothing my parents ever pushed me to do. It was definitely, I just loved the ocean, and I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be some sort of athlete, whether that was swimming, surfing. I was very competitive and driven by sport. I loved it from a very early age, and I was obviously very competitive from a very young age. So I knew that, that was my career and that was what I was destined to do. So, I wasn't going to give up.
And Avoca, it's a few hours drive north of Sydney proper, and it's a beautiful community. Again, I've been fortunate enough to spend a bit of time there, and really strong surfing community too. The likes of Ace Buchan, and I think Glenn Hall ended up moving there. Wade Carmichael. It's a for being a pretty small little hamlet, like produces an outsized amount of world-class surfers.
Yeah, I was so thankful and lucky to grow up on the Central Coast. I had just the most amazing childhood. I had so many friends that were surfing and coming through, and we had obviously great people to look up to in the surfing space. It was just such a great place to start my early life and my career, such a supportive community. They supported me through so many things, and I had so many great friends that were surfing at the time. And now, like Molly Picklum and I travel and do all that. And I remember doing board riders with her when she was like a tiny little girl. Like we were both obviously really young, but it's just funny. Like when I made that final in Bolito, I was with her. I was just like it was such a surreal moment. I was like, we're just two girls from the Central Coast, and now we're in South Africa winning events and stuff. It was a pretty cool moment. For me, I was like, yeah, it's really cool to see us. The Central Coast is a pretty small town, and but they have produced so many great surfers, so there must be something in the ocean.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned feeling like becoming a professional surfer was your destiny from a young age, but I am curious, were there other interests that ever pulled at you, like whether it was, subjects in school or art or music or other sports? Was there ever anything else that kind of gave you pause on like, well, maybe I'll do this instead?
Yeah, it was never school. I hated school. I was like, nope, there has to be something else other than school. But I was actually a competitive swimmer for most of my life. I actually was doing that all up until I won my world junior title. I was still swimming in the pool every day. I actually had a scholarship for swimming. That's where I honestly thought I was going to go.
Right. What was your event in swimming?
I ended up actually winning the Australian title for breaststroke when I was about 12. But it transitioned into a bit of freestyle and butterfly. But I loved it so much. I loved the hard work. I think that was one thing that I always thrived off, was training and then seeing those results in the pool come out. I loved that kind of feeling when you've put in the hard work and the result definitely comes. But then surfing was such a challenge for me because it was constantly, against Mother Nature, and you're learning heaps, and it ended up taking over my life and my swimming career. So I'm thankful now it has, because it's been so much fun.
Of course. And you have a number of high profile sponsors, and as you mentioned, inside and outside the jersey, you do quite a lot of work for them. When did those relationships start for you? At what age did you start working with the likes of Billabong and Oakley and the like?
Yeah, I got picked up by Billabong when I was around 12. Oh, wow. I was quite young. I was still swimming at that point. I was still at school doing everything. But early sponsorship, you're kind of just getting product and you're just like having fun and you're not really doing much. But no, my relationship with Billabong has evolved into such an amazing thing, and I've been with them for 10 years now. So yeah, they're my family. They've done everything for me. I can't say any bad words about them. They're just amazing, and they're honestly, I've had so many great opportunities, and it's been great. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And you were so successful at such a young age competitively. Is that something that I know you said that surfing didn't necessarily come natural to you, but did competitive surfing come naturally to you? Because, you in addition to your pro junior career, you won the World Junior title in 2016. And that's a huge deal when you look at the pedigree of surfers who have won that both on the men's and women's side. It really is a benchmark for kind of future greatness. So, competitively, was that something that came easy to you, or is it something you had to work for?
Yeah, I think I was just obviously very competitive, and I just loved competing. I loved everything about it. I did have a really strong junior career, and then winning the World Junior title, that was like a massive goal for me. And I felt like I was coming into that event a bit of an underdog. There was so many great girls in that field, and it felt nice to win that one. And then after that, I got kind of thrown into the big leagues, and that's when it just started going downhill. I just started losing a bunch, and I was freaked out. I was like, oh my God, like, this is the first time I felt like I was really like lost in that space. It was new, like losing a bunch, and it was really taking a toll on me. I was like not doing well with that.
It is hard, right? Like surfing, as we often say, it's a community obsessed with the cult of youth. And I think it's getting a little bit more mature in terms of finding value in achievement. But, since I started, like, you could find contracts and media coverage and even sort of just the audience and the fandom almost more interested in who's next in comparison to who actually achieves something, And so, winning a World Junior title you must have been 16, 17, like very young for you. You're automatically kind of like propelled onto the world stage, and people are like, okay, you're the next Stephanie Gilmore, or the next Tyler Wright, or the next Carissa, whatever it is. And as you said, it's like, oh my, I'm a teenager, and now I'm kind of, the expectations have shifted so much for me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I won the World Junior title when I was 16. I remember WSL gave me a wild card into the lowers event. It was like kind of like an incentive for winning the World Junior title, and that was my first CT event. Flew over to America. Yeah, it was like such a huge moment. But then again, you get put on this pedestal where you're like the next up and coming prodigy or whatever it may be. And then you just get this huge amount of like pressure. And I was like, but I'm only 16, and like the junior ranks and like career is so different to getting onto the big stage. Cause honestly, when you're there, you're just, the field is phenomenal. Like the girls are like, yeah, I had a heat with Tyler Wright and I just got absolutely blown out of the water. I was like, this is way harder than I thought. I got humbled straight away.
It's so funny. And I mean, I remember even like on the men's side, like years and years ago, when Mick Fanning won his first world title, and I remember Rip Curl at the time, they were sponsoring kind of Davey Cathals and Stuart Kennedy, and as kind of these like, okay, this is the next like toe-headed natural footer with a Rip Curl sticker, like we're going to move them into the space. But then I remember they would like run into Mick continuing to win and reinvent himself and push his own surfing, and it was almost like firing BB pellets at a freight train sometimes, because it's like, it's not really fair to put these young guys up or these young women up against these like titans of the sport. But it is one of those things where I think, you know, what you pointed out, it's like the level between the Challenger Series and the CT, I think, is so underappreciated, how much it jumps between the Pro Juniors and the CT. It's insane.
It really is insane. The year that I started doing the Pro Juniors, they actually had just cut the age bracket. So it was instead of 21 and under, it's 18 and under. So that was a huge gap. It's like you're going pretty much fresh 18-year-old into the QS or the Challenger Series, which is also another huge jump. You're competing against some amazing surfers. And then again, you're jumping to the CT, and the level is just so high. Like no matter who you draw, you have to surf out of your skin. And that was something that I really had to learn. You know, you can make QS heats and Pro Junior heats scraping through with some fives. But on the CT, you need excellent scores all the time. It's hard.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so let's talk about your first pass at the championship tour, right? So there's 2018, where I think you're a replacement surfer or a wild card for a number of events. And you actually, I'm pretty sure you finished runner-up in France that year. Like you had a great result as a replacement surfer. And then, you know, you come onto the tour in 2019, 2020 is a non-season, so 2021. And in both 2019 and 2021, you pointed out before, like kept running into that roadblock of like ninth, you know, like can't get past the ninth. So you know, talk to us a little bit, both the getting runner-up, you know, on that kind of non-season for you in France, which is a huge result. And then just full time having to kind of cut your teeth amongst the world's best surfers, and just how hard that can be for a young surfer.
Yeah, definitely. It was really hard. I was lucky enough to be traveling with Sage Erickson at the time on my replacement year. And that was a lot of fun, a lot of learning, getting to just meet new people, kind of finding your spot on the CT. I was running into those results quite often, but then going into France, I felt really comfortable on a beach break and going left. I love going left. So I felt really comfortable, and then I got that great result, and that had like boosted my confidence a lot going into that back end of the year, especially on the Challenger Series or like the QS at the time. And I wanted to qualify, obviously, because I wanted to have my full-time spot. So I came second in France, and then I went into the last event and came second and qualified for the CT, which was like a huge moment for me. But then again, the next year I kept running into those bad results and constantly just kind of like, why is this happening? Like I'm putting in the work. I feel like I should be here, but I can't get past round 3.
Right.
And then again in 2021, same thing goes. I felt like my surfing was there. I was having the best heats of my career. I was posting good scores. I was doing well, but still losing to Carissa and Steph with those high scores. Sure. And it was such a mental battle because I felt so good. I was surfing the best I had surfed in a long time, but still not getting the results, and then obviously falling off tour. So that was like a really hard space to navigate for sure.
I call those the this is my own personal one, but the Sean Cansdale years, where it's you have a surfer who's putting up 16, 17, 18 points in every heat, and they'd win, every other heat in the round except the one they were in, and then someone puts up, half a point more. And you're looking at this surfer going like, this is like a world title contender in terms of the performance, and they're getting huge scores, and it's just not bouncing their way. It's so hard to see. And that 2021 was such a wild year too, right? Because we had the off season that was 2020 for the pandemic. And then 2021, so much had changed. We'd inverted the calendar. And even after we inverted it, events are still getting canceled and shifted. There was just so much instability because of the way the world was at that point in time. And it just became really challenging. But one of the things I've noticed about your career, which I think it's not something that was always there, especially in women's surfing, is that in addition to, working on your competitive surfing, you do quite a lot of free surfing and put out quite a lot of content. You had I think it was, Dan Scott and Ava Warbeck's surfing and all girls surf film that you guys worked on during the pandemic. You do stuff with, like Stab Highway, you've got, it just seems like you're really producing quite a lot of free surfing content, in addition to your competitive surfing, which isn't always something that we've seen from women surfers.
Yeah, I think I had obviously the whole 2020 off, and I was lucky enough to be locked down in Australia. We obviously live in such an amazing country, and we were able to go to the beach every day during our lockdowns, which was very nice because I got to do it with my best friends as well. I had Steph and Nikki, Dimity, Tyler. We were all stuck in Australia at the same time. And we were surfing together every day. And we came out with our film Surfing with Dan Scott and Ava. That was just a lot of fun. We had a really good time just surfing again, like with each other. And that definitely pushes your surfing. We were doing some fun trips just in our little bubble from Lennox Head to Burley Heads. I just had such a good time off, and that's when I was really starting to think, like, is the tour where I want to be, or do I want to actually, focus on filming and putting out content? And is a women's free surfer a thing in this space? Like we have so many great men free surfers that get paid a lot, and that's their career. And I was kind of thinking, is this something I'm able to do? Is this something my sponsors would like? So I started focusing on trying to push out more content and working with that. I ended up in 2021 not going to the Surf Ranch event so I could go on Stab Highway, which was like a controversial thing. A lot of people were telling me, what are you doing? But I had a lot of faith in myself, and I felt like that was a space where I needed to grow, and I needed to put myself in those kind of areas I wasn't familiar with and go on trips with people I'd never been on trips with, and like just do something else. I just needed to do something else to see whether I liked it or not, because that was kind of like a pinnacle moment in my career where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had so much fun on that Stab Highway trip. I honestly at the end was like, I'm a free surfer now, this is what I want to do. Like I don't want to do the tour anymore. But then that competitiveness in me still came out at the start of the year. I was like, I'll just do the Aussie events and see how I feel. And then I ended up doing well. And so I've done the rest of the year now, and I'm having fun with everything. But I think, the free surf world, I love making content and being able to show that side of myself. And it's something that I still want to work on. And even if I do, qualify and do the tour, I still want to be able to go on those trips and do all those fun things still. Yeah.
That's excellent. We're going to take one more break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll talk about what's coming up for Macy Callaghan. We'll be right back. Let's talk about surfboards for a second, because it's something all surfers are obsessed with. I think when you talk to surfers who perform at such an elite level like yourself, it becomes infinitely more fascinating. And you're part of something called the Board Lab in Australia. So for listeners out there, can you kind of explain what that is?
Yeah, the Board Lab is a factory here on the Gold Coast, or it's actually just across the border on the New South Wales side. They stock from Sharpie, Chili, Axod, a bunch of brands. They're probably producing the best boards in Australia right now, in my opinion.
Right.
I'm lucky enough to work with the Board Lab itself, and that pretty much gives me the opportunity to write a bunch of different boards under the same brand. So before that, I was writing Sharpie full time. But now I ride for the Board Lab, which that gives me opportunity to surf for Sharpie and everyone else under the Board Lab. So it's a great opportunity. It's great for a surfer who wants to, dive deeper into what boards they want to ride and try a bunch of different things. And I've had a lot of fun riding a bunch of different boards. Yeah.
You mentioned writing for Sharpie, exclusively before moving to the Board Lab, where it still looks like, based on your competitive results this year, you're writing quite a few Sharpies still. How long had you been working with the Sharpie program before this?
Yeah, I think it's almost been 2 years now, I think.
Okay.
Before that, I was riding with Matt Biolis for a long time, from the age of like 13 to 20.
Oh, wow. Yeah, right.
Yeah, he had a massive part in my career, but the best move for me in my career was going to Sharpie and getting on those boards. They definitely changed my career and the way I was surfing, and I love the whole team that works for that brand. They're just so many great people working for them. I work really closely with Brendan Leckie, who shapes here in Australia for Sharpie. He's like one of my close friends. So it's nice to have that relationship with your shaper for sure.
That's interesting. And yeah, sounds like you migrated over there. We had Marcio on the podcast a few weeks ago, and it really is one of the most amazing stories, I'd say broadly in surfing at the moment, is just how that program's been built brick by brick, and the success they've had in recent years. We're rolling out like a board ranking on the CT in 2023, and we did sort of some mock rankings per event, men's, women's, and combined throughout 2022. And it's amazing how dominant those boards were. When you look at both the men's and women's tours this year, it's really, really impressive. And the feedback that you outlined as well, it's so consistent. And I find it so fascinating where there's so many world-class shapers, that build boards for championship tour surfers. And, you get a lot of these surfers that end up being free agents from time to time. And the feedback you hear, certainly in the last couple of years, from the surfers that end up on Sharpie is that, yeah, I get boards from everybody, but something about these Sharpies, they accelerate through the turns and they're picking up more speed. I've never ridden one, but I'm just like, it is amazing that they've been able to develop that. And after talking to Marcio, it just seems like he's a very dedicated person, and he's built a good program that includes people like Brendan as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Sharpie is the best board company in the world right now. You can just see it with the results from all the surfers on the CT, and the way that they are surfing. The level has risen so highly. Like Felipe and Jack are both on Sharpies now, and you can just see from their surfing how amazing the boards go. And yeah, for me, I jumped on a Sharpie it was a friend's secondhand board. I just wanted to try it, and I ended up riding it and requalifying on that board, and it was the best board I've almost ever had. And it wasn't even mine. I was like, I was just borrowing it. And after that, I was like, yeah, I need to get some more of these. And I was lucky enough to get picked up by Sharpie Australia. So yeah, the board, I don't think you can get a bad board. Honestly, they're ahead of the game. They're doing a really great job for sure.
We talked about your first few runs on the championship tour. You've had an amazing 2022 Challenger Series campaign. You got a little bit of space before you head to Haleiwa. Between the last time you were on the championship tour and now, the schedule's changed quite a bit. And the women are now starting, with the men, are now starting at Pipeline in the end of January. So based on your experience on the championship tour previously and everything you've learned since, what do you do between now and then in terms of preparing for the 2023 CT?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm so scared to surf pipe. That is the one event that really, I feel like if you're not nervous, then what do you like? I feel like the men and women are both just as nervous as each other.
Sure.
And for it to be the first event, it's definitely a little bit out of my depth, and I haven't really dived into that, haven't really surfed too many of those types of waves a whole lot. So it's going to be a challenge. But for me, I think just taking this time off and surfing some more waves like that, and really just focusing on that. I feel like every other event I feel super comfortable at for the first half of the year on the tour. But Pipe's just one of those events that you've got to really prepare for.
Absolutely. And looking at that slate of the first 5 championship tour events before the relegation, you have Pipeline, Sunset Beach, Super Tubos in Peniche, Portugal, Bells Beach and Margaret River. If you had to have a sober assessment of your own strengths and weaknesses as a surfer, which event are you looking like you probably need to do the most work to perform at, and which event as of today are you most comfortable in feeling like, as if I was competing there today, I feel like I'd do very well?
Yeah, I think I've definitely spent a lot of time in Hawaii, but it is a hard space to navigate. As a young female, I feel like I do get intimidated by the crowds and the locals, and I try and be as respectful as I can. So I haven't really spent a whole lot of time there in the water. I've obviously been there a lot, but it's something that I have to work on. And those 2 events are definitely what I feel like are a little bit out of my depth. But I'm also really excited because I feel like maybe Sunset is a good place for me. I've grown up on, lots of right-handers and some deep water surfing. I feel like I could do well there. But if I'm going to be honest, like the most comfortable place would have to be Australia and the 2 Australian events here. Bells and Margaret River, I've obviously really spent a lot of time there, and I've competed there before, and I feel extremely comfortable in those 2 places. So those would probably be my most, comfortable.
Well, it's going to be very exciting to watch. Before you go, we did reach out to our Instagram community at the Lineup Pod for questions. We got a lot back for you, Macy, but we whittled it down to 3. The first question is from @McDonald228, who says, you have the skills. What do you need to work on to win a championship tour event? Is it tactics, mentality? What will it take?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like mentally thing for me. I feel like my surfing's there now. I just need to not get so nervous and put a whole lot of pressure on myself and just have fun with it. Yeah.
Next question is from @gypsy_soul_surfer, who asks, pick one: 24 access to any wave pool in the world or the ocean?
The ocean, 100%. Yeah.
I feel like that's like a litmus test question, so you probably have to, for sure, it's got to be the ocean. You don't need the karma if it bounces the other way.
Yeah, wave pools are fun, but you can't beat the ocean.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Last question from the Instagram community that we selected is from @Celani, who asks, do you see yourself on the championship tour for another 5 years? What do you want to do post surf career?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky one. I love that free surfing space, and I love creating content. I would love to dive deeper into making more films and that kind of stuff, and traveling some more with some different people. But I'm only 22, so there's a lot of time for that.
A lot of time, yeah.
I'm gonna probably focus on that competitive space for now. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thanks to everyone that sent questions in at the Lineup Pod. We're now down to our final segment. It is the lightning round. So these are 10 questions for you to answer as quickly as you can.
Okay.
If you could only have one board setup for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Thruster, for sure.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Burrito or pizza?
Pizza.
Last book you read?
Oh, it was a Colleen Hoover book. I feel like all girls read those.
Best surf film ever?
Surfing by Dan Scott and Ava.
One wave you never have to go back to?
Ooh. Oh my God. I don't know. That's a hard one.
It's fair.
yeah, I'll have to come back to that one. There's no
It's
wave
all
I
right.
don't like. The ocean's great.
That's a good answer. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life,
Snapper rocks.
best person to share a lineup with.
Dimity Stoyle.
Worst person to share a lineup with.
Oh, Dimity Stoyle. She was always getting the best waves. She's just always after the best waves, and she never lets me get the good one.
Fair enough. Last one. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by.
Surfing more.
Wonderful. Macy Callaghan, congrats on your amazing season and all you've achieved at such a young age. Can't wait to have you back on the championship tour next year. Look forward to what you do at Haleiwa. And yeah, thanks for coming on the lineup. You were fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.